your you therefore, you're presenting your own answer to Gellner's question. Do you still think that's a good question to ask? And you are saying it's a good question to ask, but I guess the question is then, if everything is this rather amorphous mass of elements, is it really helpful to ask when modernity started? Is that a question that actually causes more problems than it kind of solves, from your perspective? Given that you've found now, like you say, 2/3 of the world are just contradicting the answers that have flowed from that question. Enchantment seems to be a big feature that modernity was supposed to explain why we're not enchanted, but it seems the wrong thing to say, because we are enchanted.
Well, I think the modernity is quite a dangerous word for several reasons. One is that most people never define it. They use it throughout all these papers, and no one ever defines what they mean. And not 9/10, but most people, if you say, well, what is modernity? They would go for the external trappings. They would say, well, it means computers or electricity or the Industrial Revolution. The physical side, I mean, when did modernity start? It started with the Industrial Revolution. I mean, it's when we changed the fossil fuels and so on. That is modernity. So as soon as sort of Stalin or whoever, communism plus electricity, basically, is Japan modern? Of course it's modern. I mean, you just go to Tokyo and you will see a modern society. This was the great wonder of Max Weber, because he wasn't taken in by the surface. He said, if you had gone to 15th century Florence or Venice, here were these hugely prosperous, hugely sophisticated, productive, banking, trading, modern-looking worlds. The Renaissance had occurred and so on and so on. Venice was the center of the world. And then if you've gone a century or two later to some remote farming house and village in New England with Benjamin Franklin, people living, rural lives with their cattle and their little church and witchcraft beliefs maybe, and so on, so on, so on, Massachusetts, which is modern. And Weber would have said New England is modern and Venice is pre-modern. And the reason is they haven't separated. They don't have the ethic. The ethic is a way of talking about the fact that in Benjamin Franklin, you find a man who is obsessed with making profit, saving time, organizing his life, following a spiritual path. The Puritan ethic is all there. In Venice, what they want to do is what they want to do in, I've just been talking about this with an American, Jeff Sachs. It's what they were doing in the southern Song in China, in Hangzhou, Suzhou. They were trading, they were banking, they were producing wonderful silk. It was a flourishing commercial civilization. But why were they doing it? What was below the surface? They were doing it for their families. They were, in Polanyi's phrase, they were in embedded worlds. In other words, the economy was still inside some things which were more important: religion, politics, society. And then the economy was inside that. What America had done was to disembed, make the economy into, as Polanyi calls it, an instituted process. And why America had done that is that they got it off the peg from England. The settlers who went there had come from a disembedded world of some antiquity in this country. And so, firstly, you have to say that modernity, if you mean anything about the outer trappings, is a useless concept. It doesn't get anywhere. And secondly, we're increasing, and this is what's interesting about your question, increasingly we're realizing that modernity is not a necessary precondition. Even the separations are not a necessary precondition for success in other fields, because there was an implication in Weber, and it's that in order to become a successful modern, in the material sense and other senses, world, you had to disembed the economy and separate things out like this and become rational and have science. We're now seeing, and China is that wonderful test case, and Japan was too, that these things seem to be separable, that you can have very advanced science and yet believe in ghosts and ancestors and so on. Ernest realized this because he talks about the disenchantment of California, the enchantment of California. You can have crazy beliefs in your private life and yet be Bill Gates. Human beings can do both things. But in China, you can see how you can have an embedded, to a certain extent, economy. Deng Xiaoping freed it, but it's still under the control of the party. And many decisions, as in Japan, are taken not for purely rational means ends reasoning, but for other ends. You're making money not in the Benjamin Franklin way, but to help your parents or your wider family or some other reason. Therefore, the motivations and the attention to time and space and all those sorts of things are different under the surface. And so you can have, and we're putting it in other terms, which is, again, not really talked about. I was hoping Arneson, who is an expert on the axial age, might have talked about this. But basically, you can have non-axial civilizations, those who have not separated, as we have in the West. But non-axial civilizations, which have never gone through the axial age, they can still be, on the surface, successful, modern, in the narrow sense, nations.